Good afternoon, everyone. To be respectful of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder, the purpose of this call is to connect with our transit systems within North Carolina. It's not for media, and we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a fairly packed agenda today. We're going to give you an update on the CARES Act implementation, go a little bit over the allowable expense resources. That was a request that we had last week. We'll also give you an update on the ropes map policy changes, talk to you a little bit about vehicle procurement, a little more details on the NCDOT revenues and possible impacts, some web resources, and then finally the future calls, and we'll wrap up with questions. So just give you a little update. I've got 4 items I want to talk to you about today. The schedule, application steps, agreement process, and system application status, just to give you a better idea of what we have to go through to get you to actually being able to submit claims for reimbursement. So this is the updated schedule. We are actually kind of midway through this schedule where we are beginning to review your applications that were submitted due last Friday to begin to issue the contracts to the subrecipients. And then we go through the DocuSign workflow process. Once we have that done, we can enter the agreements. Once the agreements are in place, then you can start submitting claims to us. And once claims are submitted, it's going to take 7 to 10 days for us to get those entered into the EBS system, and then reimbursement once submitted will be approximately 2 days back to us. So the application steps, there's 5 levels of approval. So your first step is, once you've submitted your application, is for your MDS to approve it. And then the next level is the program management will approve them. And then the applications will remain at IMD until we have received the signed contract back from you and the deputy secretary has signed the contract and attached it in EBS. And we're starting to get some of those contracts out to you guys, so hopefully we'll get turnaround on that quickly. Once that level 3 is completed, then it goes to the finance management for approval, and we verify the contract, the amounts, and the funding. And then finally, the assistant director will approve and pin the application, and the application then goes to finance. At that point, we go into the agreement process. So the finance management office converts the application into an agreement. The assistant director approves the agreement. The contract management approves that. And then you guys will receive a signed agreement via DocuSign, and the system at that point can begin invoicing. So just to reiterate, we are still in the application steps, and we still need to get through all of the steps for the agreement process before we can begin invoicing. And again, we're doing that process as quickly as possible. And I'm just going to give you a summary now on where we are with respect to the applications. So just as a reminder, we were hoping to get all the applications in by last Friday. We did pretty well. We've got 71 of 78 applications submitted. Obviously, those who did not get in by that deadline, it's not that we're not going to approve those, it's just going to delay the process for you guys a little bit. Of those, 4 have received level 1 approval, 56 are at level 2, and 1 has received level 4 approval. There have been some that have been returned for correction, and then there are 8 that are currently submitted that are waiting for any level of approval. So they have not yet been gone through or assigned to the for the processing. For the 5307 CARES Act applications, we have a total of 10 that have been submitted into the EBS. 5 have been submitted and are awaiting review. 5 of those have received level 2 approval, and 2 are in process but have never been submitted yet. Last week we had several questions about allowable expenses and how to submit your claims, and we will be developing more content on that in the future. But right now we just wanted to provide to you some resources. So obviously the first one would be the FTA frequently asked questions. There's also some guidance that is from the Emergency Relief Manual, and then also the FTA circular. And I'll go into a little bit of more fine granular breakdown from each of those. So the Emergency Relief Manual says that the funds that are not allowed are for projects where funds were already obligated prior to the declared emergency or major disaster. So basically that's any operating funds prior to 1/20 of 2020 or any capital expenses, because we're not doing capital expenses from fiscal year 20 under this original amount of money. What is allowed are basically any expenses that are directly related to responding to COVID, and then also any operating, so that would basically be your cleaning supplies, your PPE, things of that nature. Operating systems that are not directly related to COVID, which is basically maintaining your regular or reduced services and at the federal share that's normally allowed for operating. And then finally, operating assistance for projects and capitals that do not involve a substantial change to the function, location, or capacity of an asset, and we must document that. So that would be the things like the shields and things along that nature. The FTA circular has the eligible capital expenses, which include the acquisition, construction, and improvement of facilities and equipment needed for a safe, efficient, and coordinated public transportation system. So these will be eligible. Excuse me. Sorry about that. These will be eligible expenses, but as we have indicated, that first round right now is just operational. And those operating expenses that are eligible are basically fuel, oil, driver salaries, and fringe benefits, dispatcher salaries and fringe benefits, and licenses. And it may include some maintenance and other non-operating expenses. And just as a reminder, only net operating expenses are eligible for assistance. So this is after you take out your fair revenue. We updated the SMAP and ROPE policy change earlier this month with applications due to us, or excuse me, policy documents due to us by May 29th. And the policy change is basically that you do not need to return any remaining SMAP and ROPE payments. It must be signed by the county manager and transit directors. As of now, we have received 62 of the 128 that we are expecting. And at this point, all but one are electing to keep their SMAP and ROPE remaining funds. At this point, we're receiving more responses from our ROPE systems, not as many documents for SMAP. So if you are a SMAP recipient, please get those documents signed and returned to us. If for some reason you have some difficulty in doing so, please let your MDS know so that we can keep accounting of what we're still expecting or what issues you might have in getting those documents signed. So we have in fiscal year 20, the vehicle procurement, there's been delays due to plant shutdowns or other impacts from COVID-19. At this point, there are 70 vehicles that are yet to be delivered. This impacts 13 5311 systems and 6 5339 systems. Because of this delay and impact to multiple systems, we do anticipate doing an internal administrative POP extension to ensure that you can claim these expenses on your fiscal year 20 capital expenditures. Just as a reminder from last week, North Carolina DOT is having some revenue issues. The effects of COVID-19 on the cash flow have been significant. Fortunately, it seems that VMT is rebounding. Last count, it was about 11% below normal for this time of year, which obviously is down, but not down to the 40%, 30 to 40% that we were seeing earlier in the shutdown. We do have the snow and ice removal, which is going to require a reduction in our fiscal year 21 IMD budget of that amount. And we are going to take that along all of our programs at an equal rate. So this will result in some reductions in both SMAP, ROPE, as well as some of the other programs that do not directly impact our systems. The final thing that I wanted to note that may impact our ability to process applications and such in the coming month is that we have been directed that all DOT staff will be experiencing some furloughs. We are trying to ensure that the impacts to our systems are as minimal as possible with respect to staggering staff furloughs so that everyone's not off at the same time. But your MDS, for instance, may be off a total of 20 hours for the month of June. So just keep in contact with them to find out what their schedule might be if you have any concerns about that. But hopefully, because it's only 20 hours, the impacts to you guys will be minimal. Just as a reminder, these are our the COVID-19 web resources. The web page may be changing here shortly as we are migrating away from Smart Sheets, at least for the time being. So that, but hopefully the amount of content that we will be able to provide to you will be the same. It's just that the format will be slightly different. For future calls, right now we are still planning to at least schedule the meetings once a week. We think it's very important to have a touch point with you guys, especially as we go through the application and agreement process. If for some reason there's no new content, we may cancel, and obviously we'll let you know that as soon as possible. It seems that each week, shortly before the call, there's always something that pops up that we think is important to share with you. So we would like to continue to keep them scheduled weekly at this point. We may, as we progress into the year, moving to bi-weekly and then possibly monthly. All right, I've got a tickle in my throat. Post-COVID, we've seen some value in these meetings. We also received some feedback from the SurveyMonkey that some of you guys would like to see these types of meetings continue. So what we've been trying to think about what this might look like. And so we may continue with guest presenters and continuing to have content of interest to the transit systems, more frequently than, say, a conference or, some kind of infrequent meeting, but kind of more regular to try to, touch base to, maybe do some more frequent peer-to-peer exchanges, as well as bringing in guest speakers that may have information or resources that are of value to the transit systems. And so now I'm going to go turn it back over to Blair if there's been any questions or if we have any questions for this week. So I will give it back over to you, Blair.
Can you see that?
I can. I just moved it over to my other screen so it would be larger. So the first question we have is, would the eligible operating expenses be after taking out the fare revenue paid by passengers plus revenue received from 5307, 5310, HCCBG for trips provided to passengers that qualify under those funding sources, meaning basically that the CARES funding would only cover the county portion of the trips that had any funding source. Boy, that's a I'm gonna toss that over to Tammy because she understands reimbursement better than I do. Tammy, did you want to take a stab at that?
If I take mute, I think I looked at this one before. Kind of tangled. Let's see. I have in all the documents I went through to try to combine what you can and can't do. There's a more detailed description of how to get your operating expense and what should come out. So I'm going to post that in this answer box, but I'm going to have to go look it back up. It's a little detailed.
So I guess so. The short answer is we will give you the detailed answer to that post this meeting, and we have been posting the responses to these questions on the website. And we will continue to do that. So we'll give you the detailed response to that after this meeting. The next question is, may we have a copy of this PowerPoint to share with county managements and finance? All of the PowerPoints are available for download or viewing post this meeting, as well as if you want to actually watch it. We're also recording these webinars, so certainly you can download those presentations. Since NCDOT will be implementing an internal POP for capital, will the agencies not need to submit an extension request? I'll punt this over to Tammy as well, but my understanding is if we do it, we were waiting to see if there was going to be a lot of agencies that were impacted, and it seems that there still are. And so I think we're going to take the lead on that. But Tammy, is that correct, or am I answering that incorrectly?
That's correct. We will just do one blanket, what I call an administrative POP extension internally for those vehicles.
Okay. Next question. Can we budget and plan to receive the normally allocated amount of SMAP next fiscal year? The SMAP levels have been determined, but as I just indicated, we need to make reductions in all state-funded programs in IMD to offset those snow and ice removals. So we will give you those numbers as soon as we can. I mean, hopefully the impacts will be minimal, especially since we do have, CARES Act funding that can be used to help, fill in those gaps. Next question, can you provide us with the formula that was used for the SMAP allocation? The answer to that is yes. There is a guidance document as to how SMAP is allocated. I will provide that since that question's been asked more than once, I will provide that to Blair to upload to the website as a resource, so that way you guys can see how we calculate the SMAP allocation. Has a decision been made on whether or not we can have an extra budget revision for our fiscal year 2053-11? Tammy, that would be a question for you. I think that's been asked once before, if they can have an additional revision to their budget since there's been more uncertainty with the fact that the CARES Act funding has come in.
Yeah, we are going to allow an extra budget revision. We just ask that you know, not go crazy with it, but to be aware that we will allow those because we know that's part of this process.
Okay. In reference to question 1, this is a good reason that an example claim would be helpful during a call. And to answer your question is, we do plan to have an example claim, hopefully by next week. It's just a matter of being able to pull together that into slides where we can present it to you. So it is our hope that by next week we will have an example claim to walk through for the call. Would it be fair to say any expense for a transit system can be claimed as an operating expense except for items currently claimed under the current 5311 grant for this fiscal year? Things like vehicle parts, supplies, uniforms, office supplies, telephone, electricity, etc. Tammy, that would be a question for you because I'm not sure exactly what goes under operating. I mean, I know obviously with the personnel and, you know, the cleaning supplies and things like that are covered, but I don't know about vehicle parts, supplies, uniforms.
My understanding is as long as it is not an expense that changes an asset, that increases the value of the asset, then it can go through operating, of course, you know, within reason. And there's a little more. I did a one-pager that I'll post on the website too, for people to have access for information.
Okay, so have third quarter admin reimbursements been delayed due to the CARES Act? Tammy, that's for you too. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's been any delay due to CARES Act. I don't know that if my understanding is that we're not delaying payments if we've received claims, to my knowledge. But Tammy, do you have any other insight on that?
I am thinking that somewhere along the line, we had maybe said to delay them until we figured out what the CARES Act was going to do. But if you need your admin claim processed, then please let us know. We should be able to process it. If you're planning to use the CARES money instead, then of course, don't submit your claim into your current grant, because we can't reverse it after it's been done.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Is we had that question, you know, prior. If you've submitted claims, you basically it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to reverse those and convert them to the 100% federal. In addition to that, if you've claimed as much as your allocation was for both federal, state, and local match, then there's really no benefit in doing so because we cannot increase your federal share. Could NCDOT CARES funds also be used to cover match for 5339 capital replacements requested? I'm going to defer this to Tammy if
Can
she
I
wants
chime
to add it.
in? This is Myra. Can I chime in? No, it cannot.
Sure.
It's only, no, CARES is only for 5311 and 5307, not for 5339.
Okay. Thank you, Myra.
Can't, and also you cannot use a federal grant to match another federal grant.
That is correct.
What is the estimated percentage of reduction of SMAP and rope? I'll have to get back to you on that. I've got a tentative amount. It's going to be it's actually a set dollar amount that I have to reduce my budget by. And I haven't factored into that what the percentage is. So I will have to get back on that. What was a decision made regarding whether plexiglass upfits for vehicles can be claimed under the operations portions of 5307 CARES versus having to wait to submit in round 2? Cost was less than $16,000 for 24 vehicles. I thought we had made the decision that this was a minimal expense, that it was not impacting the cost of the vehicle, and it could be claimed under this first phase.
That's correct. It can go under operating as other equipment or supplies.
Yep. Would replacement cameras on the vehicles be an eligible expense once the capital portion of CARES is opened? My understanding is yes. So it would be, anything that's a capital investment that we can look into. It doesn't have to be a capital investment that's going to, impact, COVID response. So can CARES cover the match for 5311 capital replacement? I think we just answered that federal can't match federal. So the answer would be no. And that is the last question that is currently from the chat box. Let me open it up to make sure there's nothing new. We'll give everyone a couple more minutes just in case, but otherwise it looks like we may be having a, oh, wait a minute. I have 2 buses on order that are being funded by a CMAQ grant. Will my grant be extended by the internal POP extension? I'm not 100% sure if it, because they're being funded by a different mechanism, if it's impacted, because typically CMAQ grants have their own deadlines, but I don't know if once it's rolled into the flex to FTA, if it goes under the same requirements. Tammy, do you know with the CMAQ projects if they're held to the same timeline as your normal FTA procurements?
They usually are, but I typically look at those individually to make sure that, that they are. So let me know which ones you're talking about, or let your MDS know so I can verify those particular grants.
Okay, yeah, so for the 2 buses, just let us know what system we're talking about, and we can coordinate between the CMAQ group as well as us to find out whether we need to do a separate extension or not. The next one is, okay, so that's this part of that one. Okay. I don't see any other questions after this. We'll give everyone another minute to raise their hand or if they have any other questions. Okay, we've got one more question. Can you please explain the 5311 admin and 5311 operating claims process versus claiming against CARES grant?
You want me to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that the process is going to be the same. It's just depending on which funding source you're claiming against. But Tammy, if you want to chime in, that would be great.
Yeah, with the CARES Act, everything that's going to be operating, admin is a part of operating that was separated out years ago to get a higher match. Being as the CARES money is all 100%, everything will be billed under the operating, whether it's admin or drivers or whatever. I hope that helps.
So basically, the process should be the same. It's just that we're not asking you to break out admin and operating on the CARES Act funding, just to make sure that you can only submit, an invoice under one or the other. You can't submit them under both. Okay. And it looks like that is our last question. Oh, wait a minute. Are radio replacements covered under the capital portion of the CARES Act as well? I think this goes back up to the cameras. Our understanding is any capital expense that normally would be covered under 5311 or 5307 should be eligible for being covered at the 100% level under CARES Act. So yes. Is preventive maintenance covered under CARES Act 5311?
Yes.
There's and actually there was another question up above as well. So you're answering. So the first question was, can questions and answers be posted to the website? Still waiting on May 6th and May 13th. Both of those are up there. There was a couple questions that were a little bit harder for us to answer and get definitive guidance on, but both of those are up today. Is preventative maintenance covered under CARES Act 5311? And Tammy, you were saying yes?
Yes, in 5311, preventive maintenance falls under the operating grant. In 5307, it's a capital grant.
Okay, we've got some more questions here. Will there be a list of revenues that will offset the CARES funding along with reimbursable expenditures?
There is a little more detail on the revenue side that I'm going to put out there. As far as expenses, I mean, I'd love to give you a list that's all yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. I can't do that. It's a little subjective. So it's more of, if you have an expenditure and you feel like that it is that it qualifies under the reasoning that you need it under the CARES Act, and you can justify it, then there most likely will not be a problem. But with the revenues to offset, I'll have to I have a little more guidance on that I'll put out.
Okay. Next question is, will we be given a set amount of funds to apply for with CARES capital application as we receive for the admin application? We have not gotten into a definitive answer for that as at this point. Basically, like we had said before, we've got like the 3 tiers of funding. The first one was based on your typical allocation method. The second one is going to be more needs-based. It's going to be based on a demonstrated need for additional funding. If there isn't money left over, that's when we will be looking at the capital expenditures or the capital investments. And so because that's a little bit further out, we just don't know how we're going to apply that, whether it will be based on normal allocation methodologies, or whether it will be based on demonstrated need or an application process. So we will have to give you future, we will be working through NCPTA as to getting guidance onto how we think it would be best to do that process, but that's still to be coming. Our repairs for vehicles also claimable with CARES. So I would say that if it is something that's normally claimable under your typical funding mechanism, then it should be fundable as well. And I think I'm not saying anything else. Okay, wait a minute, there's one more. I understand CARES could be used to replace vehicles at 100%. Would IMD consider moving some of the replacement vehicles requested in 5339 to CARES funds available as a way to fund more replacements and also reduce local match burden?
Heather,
Yep,
Myra, let me come in.
okay,
We've already submitted that grant to FDA, in which we cannot.
okay,
So it may be something we can look at for fiscal year 22, but FY21 is already with FDA. So we can't make any changes to that existing FDA grant application as far as taking vehicles out of that. That's already gone.
okay. Thank you, Myra, for clarifying that. Okay, I think that's the last question. So unless I hear anything else, I will thank you guys for your time. And as soon as we get these, the responses to your questions formalized, we will post them to the website. The slides will also be posted to the website as well as the recording of this presentation. And I hope you guys all have a great afternoon. Oh my